Alright, so we have finally started to put together the entire puzzle that is going to be Avengers Doomsday. This isn't just wild speculation anymore. It feels like we're connecting dots that Marvel has been carefully placing for years, and the picture that's forming is absolutely insane. We're talking about the Avengers, but not just our familiar crew. We're looking at the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and heroes from every corner of the multiverse teaming up for a battle that will literally determine the fate of everything, and standing against them, the one villain powerful and brilliant enough to mastermind the end of all things, Dr. Doom. But this isn't the Doom from the comics you might be picturing. This is a version uniquely tied to the very heart of the MCU, to a moment we all witnessed and thought we understood. We now have a pretty solid idea of why these teams are crossing paths, what the Council of Kangs, the Ten Rings Beacon, and this space crisis everyone's whispering about actually mean, and how it's all barreling toward a catastrophic head-on collision. Now, before we dive headfirst into the deep end of the multiversal pool, let's talk about how we're building this theory. We're not dealing with leaks or spoilers here, because, let's be honest, where's the fun in just having the answers handed to you? It ruins the magic, and it makes putting together a theory like this feel cheap. Instead, we're working with what's already out in the open, the breadcrumbs Marvel has intentionally left for us. We're looking at public interviews with directors and actors, social media posts from cast and crew that they've willingly shared, and of course the most crucial pieces of all, those post-credit scenes that we all stay in our seats for. It's like being a detective where all the clues are hidden in plain sight, scattered across movies and shows we've already watched. We're just connecting them in a way that starts to reveal the bigger picture. And speaking of big pictures, let's start with the biggest clue of all. A comment from the Russo brothers that, at the time, seemed almost like a throwaway line but now feels like the master key to the entire saga. They said that Tony Stark's snap in Avengers Endgame is directly connected to the rise of Dr. Doom. Let that sink in for a second. The single most heroic, sacrificial moment in the entire Infinity Saga is the catalyst for its greatest villain. That's not a coincidence. That's masterful storytelling. It also explains the rumors about Robert Downey Jr. potentially returning, not as Iron Man, but as the man behind the Iron Mask. So, let's start our story right there. At the moment the universe was saved and, unknowingly, a new threat was born. Imagine the cold open for Avengers Doomsday. We're back on the battlefield. The air is thick with dust and desperation. Thanos has his army and it looks hopeless. Then, Tony Stark gets the stones and he says those iconic spine-tingling words, "I am Iron Man." He snaps. The energy surge rips through him. We see his life fading, and Pepper tells him they're going to be okay. It's the scene we all remember, the scene that made us cry. But this time, the camera pulls back. It pulls way back, through the clouds, into the cosmos, and we see a familiar, massive, bald head floating in the starscape. It's Uatu, the Watcher, and he begins to narrate. This is Marvel's brilliant way of catching up the entire audience, from the hardcore fans who have seen every Disney Plus show to the casual viewers who might have missed a few, without resorting to a clunky previously on montage. The Watcher is the perfect vehicle for exposition because that's his entire purpose. He's supposed to be telling us these stories. He can recap the Avengers time heist, Tony's ultimate sacrifice, and even Steve Rogers' decision to stay in the past with Peggy, which itself created a branch timeline. But then he hits us with the twist, but not in every universe. He reminds us of the core rule established in Endgame itself by the Ancient One: remove an Infinity Stone, and the flow of time splits. That single snap didn't just create one outcome, it created a splinter, a divergent possibility. The Watcher can then elegantly weave in other crucial events from the multiverse saga. He can remind us of Loki grabbing the Tesseract and creating a new branch. A branch that led him to the TVA, to self-discovery, and ultimately to his own heroic sacrifice to save all of reality. This reminder of a villain becoming a hero perfectly sets the stage for the Watcher's next point, the inverse. What if a hero, or the potential for one, becomes the ultimate villain? This is where he introduces us to the central concept of the multiverse saga, choice. Our choices define us, but in a multiverse, every possible choice is happening somewhere, creating infinite versions of ourselves. and the choices others make for us before we're even born can set us on a path we never could have imagined. This leads us directly to Tony Stark, or more specifically, to Victor Von Doom. In our universe, 616, Tony snaps and dies a hero, but in a splintered reality born from that exact same moment, a different outcome occurs. In that reality, the snap still happens, Thanos is still defeated, but Tony survives. He's horrifically scarred by the cosmic energy, his face marred in a way that is unmistakably reminiscent of Doctor Doom's classic injuries from the comics. And in surviving, perhaps because his nanotech suit fused with the stone's power in a unique way, he becomes something new. He becomes aware of the multiverse, and he discovers a terrifying truth about his own origin. This is where that oddly specific and confusing scene from Endgame comes back into play. Remember when Tony and his dad are talking, and Howard mentions that Maria is pregnant? Tony looks genuinely surprised and confused, as if the timeline of his own birth doesn't quite add up. What if it doesn't? What if Howard and Maria Stark lost their biological child, and in their grief, they adopted a baby? A baby who was actually a Von Doom, hidden away for his own safety, or as part of some Latvian political intrigue. In our main timeline, that baby grew up as Tony Stark, inheriting a fortune and a company, and became Iron Man. But in this other splinter timeline, the one where he survived the snap, he discovers his true heritage. He learns he is Victor Von Doom, and with the power and knowledge he now possesses, he fully embraces that destiny. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, because I thought it too. So Doom is just evil Tony Stark? That sounds a little boring, to be honest. And you're right. An antagonist who is 99% the same as a hero we already know and love, just with a goatee and a bad attitude, lacks the grandeur we expect from Dr. Doom. But that's why I think the truth is slightly different and far more compelling. I believe the Watcher's narration will show us that in another universe, a universe that was never policed by the TVA, a boy named Victor Von Doom was never adopted by the Starks. He grew up in Latveria, a brilliant mind born into hardship, who mastered both technology and sorcery. In his universe, when Thanos arrived, it was Doom who assembled the forces to stop him. It was Doom who got his hands on the Infinity Stones, and it was Doom who snapped his fingers. He survived, earning those iconic scars as a badge of his sacrifice and power, just as Tony did in another life. He is, in his own mind, the hero of his story, but his survival and his newfound omnipotence, much like Infinity Ultron in What If, make him aware of the wider multiverse, and he sees the chaos, the disorder, the countless versions of himself and others. He sees the Council of Kangs vying for control, and he sees the inevitable collapse looming, and he decides that the only way to save existence is to rule it with an iron fist. This Doom isn't just a villain, he's a tragic figure, a savior who has become a tyrant because he believes it's the only way. This version allows him to be a completely distinct character from Tony, with his own history, motivations, and godlike arrogance, while still being intrinsically linked to that foundational MCU moment. This brings us to the other major players who thought they were going to be the big bads of this saga, the Council of Kangs. We met them in that chilling post-credits scene from Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. We see Immortus, Rama-Tut, and a version of the Centurion gathered, and they're talking about the exiled one being dead. At the time, we all assumed they were talking about the Kang the Conqueror that Scott Lang just defeated, the one who got sucked into his own multiversal engine core. But I think that was a deliberate misdirect. I believe they were referring to He Who Remains, the one who was killed by Sylvie at the end of Loki Season 1. This is crucial because it recontextualizes the entire conflict. He Who Remains wasn't just a Kang variant, he was the one who had won the first multiversal war. His solution was radical isolation. He isolated our timeline, as he told Loki and Sylvie. He created the Sacred Timeline, which is the main MCU universe, 616, and he wrapped it in a protective bubble, hiding it away from the rest of the multiverse. The TVA's job was to prune any timeline branches that grew too long and risked touching that red line on their monitors, a line that represented the barrier between their safe, single universe and the dangerous, chaotic multiverse teeming with other Kang variants. So, when the Kang in the post-credit scene says, they're beginning to touch the multiverse, and if we let them, they will take everything, he's not talking about the Ant family, he's talking about the people of the sacred timeline. With He Who Remains Dead, the sacred timeline was unleashed. It began to branch uncontrollably, and, as we saw in Loki Season 2, it started to die as it tried to merge with the wider multiverse. Loki's solution was to become the new heart of the multiverse, weaving the timelines into a beautiful living tree, the Yggdrasil of Norse myth, that could grow and thrive alongside all the other universe trees in the cosmic forest. The director of Loki has even confirmed this is how the Marvel multiverse is structured. But here's the problem Loki didn't fully anticipate: an ever-expanding, completely free multiverse is inherently unstable. In cosmological theory, if the universe keeps expanding, it could eventually lead to a heat death, where everything is too spread out and cold for life. But if there's enough mass and gravity, the expansion could reverse, leading to a big crunch, a cataclysmic collapse where all matter and energy in the universe are pulled back into a single, infinitely dense point, which would then likely trigger a new Big Bang and start the cycle all over again. Now, apply that to a multiverse, which is infinitely more complex and dense. The sheer weight of infinite universes expanding and pressing against each other could be creating multiversal incursions, and if left unchecked, could lead to a total multiversal collapse. A big crunch on a scale we can't even comprehend. This is the Doomsday the title refers to. It's not just about Doctor Doom, it's about the literal end of all things. And this is where all our post-credit scenes start to lock into place like pieces of a doomsday clock. First, the Ten Rings beacon from Shang-Chi. When Shang-Chi and Xialing study the rings, they discover they're emitting a signal. Wong shows up and identifies it as a beacon. And if you look at the visual of that beacon, it looks exactly like a stylized version of Loki's timeline tree from the finale of his show, just turned on its side. The Ten Rings are a cosmic GPS. They're a map, and the destination is Loki, sitting at the center of time, holding everything together. The Avengers will need to find this map to get to Loki before Doom does. Then, we have the space crisis mentioned by Yelena in the Thunderbolts post-credit scene. She's frustrated that no one is telling them about this huge crisis, and she complains, "We're running out of space already." It's impossible. This isn't about real estate on Earth, this is a literal crisis in space-time. The fabric of the universe is being stretched and torn by the incursions. We've already seen evidence of this. In Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, we learn that incursions are real and devastating, and Clea recruits Strange to help fix one he apparently caused. In the Marvels, the main plot involves a tear in space-time caused by a jump point malfunction, which results in Monica Rambeau getting stuck in another universe, specifically, the Fox X-Men universe, where she meets a version of the Beast. Her very presence there is likely making that tear worse. And let's not forget the Fantastic Four are on their way from their universe, 828, into the MCU 616, as teased in their first movie. Reed Richards literally talks about his equation, confirming parallel Earths exist on different dimensional plates. Their method of travel is probably going to rip another hole. And hey, we're building a massive theory here, and if you're enjoying this deep dive into the multiverse, do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It genuinely helps the channel out more than you know, and it ensures you don't miss the next piece of the puzzle. Think of it as your own personal tempad, keeping you on the right timeline. Okay, commercial over, back to the end of everything. So, the stage is set. The multiverse is a ticking time bomb, and Doom knows it. He has a plan, and it's a brutal one. He's going to force the big crunch. He's going to collapse the multiverse himself, so he can rebuild it in his own image. But to do that, he needs two things: a seat at the center of time, and a power source immense enough to fuel the collapse and the rebirth. That's Loki's throne, and that's Franklin Richards. This is where the Fantastic Four post-credit scene becomes critical. We see Doom in the flesh, and he's there for one reason: to kidnap Franklin Richards. In the comics, Franklin is an Omega-level mutant with the ability to manipulate reality and create entire universes with his mind. He's connected to the fundamental power of creation, the power cosmic. Doom needs that power. So, he snatches Franklin and bolts across the multiverse. The Fantastic Four, of course, give chase, and their pursuit leads them directly into the MCU's Universe 616. Imagine the scene: their weird fantastic rocket rips through a dimensional barrier and crash lands in the Hudson River, right in the middle of New York City. It's a scene straight out of the Avengers, but this time, it's the FF. Cue Spider-Man swinging by to investigate, because of course he would. The new Avengers, likely a team Sam Wilson has been trying to put together off-screen, arrives on the scene. There's going to be tension, confusion, and probably a brief, unnecessary fight because that's how superheroes introduce themselves. But eventually, they'll talk. Reed Richards will explain the situation. A godlike villain from their world has taken their son, and they've tracked him here. Bucky Barnes, seeing the scale of the threat, will probably call Sam Wilson, echoing that iconic moment from Infinity War where Tony calls Steve despite their fallout. Thanos is coming. It doesn't matter who you're talking to or not. The threat is bigger than their disagreements. Sam will arrive with his own ragtag team. We can speculate who might be on it. Maybe She-Hulk, maybe Hulk himself, Shang-Chi, and others. I'd love a moment where someone like USS Agent John Walker looks at Sam's team and laments, "You have two Hulks? That's just not fair. We should have a Hulk." It's a fun nod to the past while highlighting the new dynamics. They might even jokingly float the idea of springing Thunderbolt Ross from prison, given his history. Once everyone is gathered, likely at the Avengers Tower, they need a plan. Reed will want to use their advanced technology to track Franklin, probably by scanning for his unique cosmic energy signature, similar to how he tracked the Silver Surfer. This is where the MCU's experts on the weird get involved. Shang-Chi will bring up the 10 rings and the beacon. Wong will be summoned, and he'll bring in America Chavez because her star-shaped multiverse-hopping power is the only reliable way to travel where they need to go. They'll realize that the 10 Rings beacon and Ms. Marvel's bangles, which also have multiversal energy, are two parts of the same map. When used together, they can pinpoint the location of the beacon, Loki, so the heroes split into teams. This is a classic Avengers move, and it fits the scale of the threat. Team 1 is the Find Loki team. This will be led by Thor. We know from set photos and videos that Chris Hemsworth's stunt double was filming at the TVA set, specifically in the room that leads to Loki's throne. He was accompanied by actors playing Falcon, US Agent, and The Thing. So, Thor, with his cosmic awareness and his adopted daughter Love, who was created by eternity and might have visions of the coming collapse, will lead this squad to the end of time to protect Loki. Team 2 is the Rescue Franklin team. This will be led by Reed Richards for obvious reasons. He'll be joined by America Chavez to do the actual traveling, and likely Ms. Marvel, because Carol Danvers, who will be trying to find Monica, will vouch for her and her bangle's importance. Their destination? The Fox X-Men universe, where we know Monica is stranded, and where Doom has likely taken Franklin to use his power away from his home turf. Team 3 is the Home Guard. This team, led by Sam Wilson, has to stay behind in Universe 616 to protect it. Because while all this is going on, the incursions are getting worse, and they're not the only ones aware of the threat. Now, over in the X-Men universe, we get the iconic meetup we've been waiting for. The Avengers and Fantastic Four arrive and, of course, immediately clash with the X-Men. It's tradition, but after the initial fight, they'll realize they're on the same side. However, not everyone will agree on the solution. This is where Magneto's philosophy becomes a major problem. He is, at his core, an isolationist and a survivalist. He will look at the data and see the incursion about to happen between his universe and 616. And he will remember what Reed Richards, the Illuminati one, said in Multiverse of Madness: the only way to save your universe from an incursion is to destroy the other universe first. So, Magneto makes the cold, logical, and terrifying decision to save his world. He must destroy Universe 616. He will rally a faction of mutants and launch an attack on the MCU, leading to an all-out war on Earth that the Home Guard has to fight. Meanwhile, the other two teams are racing against time. The Find Loki team, led by Thor, reaches the throne room. They stand guard, ready to protect the god of stories. But Doom arrives, and he is unstoppable. He cuts through the heroes. Thor puts up the fight of his life, the last one standing, but even the god of thunder is overpowered by Doom's combined might of magic and technology. Just as Reed's rescue Franklin team arrives, having successfully retrieved his son, but failing to stop Doom's overall plan, they witness the final moments. Doom seizes Loki's throne. We see Loki on the ground, cradling a wounded Thor, mirroring the heartbreaking scene from Infinity War where Thor held his brother. The roles are reversed, and the symbolism is crushing. Doom, now seated at the center of all time, with the reality-warping power of Franklin Richards at his command, enacts his plan. He doesn't just start a war, he ends existence. He triggers the Big Crunch. We see the multiverse collapsing, stars and galaxies and entire realities winking out of existence, dissolving into a silent gray void. This is the Doomsday. This is the end of the MCU as we know it. But Doom isn't done. From the nothingness, he begins to create. Using his will and Franklin's power, he gathers the shattered pieces of destroyed worlds and fuses them together into a single patchwork planet. This is Battleworld. He becomes the God King of this new, terrible reality, ruling over the survivors from countless universes who now have to live by his merciless laws. The stage is perfectly set for Secret Wars, a story about rebellion, redemption, and the final fight to rebirth the multiverse. And that's it. That's the theory. Avengers Doomsday is the story of how the Avengers' greatest victory planted the seed for their ultimate defeat, how the multiverse's freedom led to its collapse, and how a man who wanted to save everything became the tyrant who destroyed it all to rebuild it in his image. It's an epic, tragic, and mind-bendingly huge story that connects every corner of the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse. But hey, this is just what I pieced together from the clues. What do you think? Does this feel like a satisfying culmination of the multiverse saga to you? The final act of the film would be the rebellion's last, desperate, all-or-nothing gamble. Through immense sacrifice and cunning, perhaps with Loki finally revealing his true, chaotic colors in a spectacular betrayal of Doom that serves his own selfish goals, the tattered resistance would discover the secret heart of Doom's power, the anchor that holds the disparate pieces of Battleworld together. This could be a captured Beyonder's power source, or the harnessed essence of a dead celestial, or the stabilized core of the temporal loom from the TVA. Their mission becomes terrifyingly simple and impossibly difficult: sever the anchor. The final battle wouldn't be on a grassy plain or a city street, it would be fought across the violently unstable landscape of Battleworld itself, with domains crashing together, gravity failing, and the very ground disintegrating beneath their feet. It would be pure, unadulterated, spectacular chaos. The heroes would have to fight their way to the core, facing down Doom's most loyal barons and his own immense, technologically augmented mystical power. The cost would be enormous, and Marvel would have to have the courage to make it feel real. We would see major, permanent sacrifices. Perhaps Thor, in a final glorious act worthy of a king, would channel the full power of the Odin Force to hold back Doom's wrath, knowing it will consume him utterly. Maybe Doctor Strange, in a tragic echo of his Multiverse of Madness variant, would expel every last drop of his magic to create a protective dome around the other heroes, becoming completely mortal and vulnerable, or worse. Finally, against all odds, they would reach the anchor and destroy it. Doom's stolen power shatters, and he falls from his self-made godhood, crashing back to the ground as just a man in iron armor again. But in his fury, his arrogance, and his bitter disappointment, he would trigger a final, spiteful fail. Safe. If he cannot be the god that rules this world, then no one can. Battleworld, deprived of its binding force, begins to implode. It seems ripping apart with the force of a million Big Bangs in reverse. And this, right here, is where the film would end. Not with a celebration, not with a quiet moment of relief, but with a total, absolute cataclysm. As the stitched-together realities fly apart in a storm of dying matter and energy, a mysterious, unseen force, perhaps the true Beyonders finally noticing the anomaly, or a last-ditch, desperate effort from the remains of the Time Variant's authority, sweeps our surviving, horrified heroes away, saving them from immediate annihilation, but hurling them into an unknown, formless void. The last thing we see before the screen cuts to black is Doom himself, adrift in the chaos, his magnificent armor cracked and scorched, but his indomitable will unbroken, bowing into the screaming abyss. This is not the end. Doom endures. It leaves the audience with the chilling, undeniable knowledge that the Avengers failed. They didn't save the multiverse, their actions accelerated its final death, and the only thing that remains is the uncertain, terrifying promise of one final war in the sequel, Secret Wars. It's a devastating, bold, and unforgettable way to end a chapter, ensuring that the stakes for the finale are not just high but absolute, setting the stage for a final confrontation where the very definition of reality is on the line.